People don't realize it yet, but the United States is the new emerging market.
People do just get more and more dissatisfied. Inflation kind of happens. Everybody feels more and more squeezed.
We've got 50-year mortgages. We've got $2,000 stimmy checks. We can't cut a thing because the government can't stop printing currency.
The option for some sort of deflationary bust or even a nominal decline in asset prices, it's just not on the table.
We have John Haar, former Wall Street insider.
You know what would really make homes more affordable?
While America inflates its way to third world status, Bitcoin becomes the global benchmark.
Bitcoin is a $2 trillion asset. It should be something orders of magnitude higher.
Bitcoin price suppression. Is it really happening, and where is it coming from?
We have a real example of paper Bitcoin.
The world is changing rapidly. Most won't see this shift, but those who do will be able to position their families forever.
Look at the monetary assets and then assume that Bitcoin can capture a healthy percentage of that over a 5, 10, 30-year period. The whole topic of like price suppression, paper Bitcoin, it is an interesting one. What I always point to whenever this type of thing comes up is we have a real example of paper Bitcoin in our lifetime not that long ago, like literally 3 years ago. That this is what was reported when people went inside FTX and said, okay, how much Bitcoin do they actually have? It's always easy to remember. They literally had one Bitcoin, one actual Bitcoin on their like 1.0. That's what I'm saying. And
not 0.1, not
I forget the amount that they, not 1 million, not 100, not 1,000, one actual Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I forget the other number of what they were supposed to have. Obviously, it was a lot larger. I think it was like 1,500 Bitcoin, something like that. That's what they were supposed to have, meaning that's what they told their clients. You know, you have an FTX account, you bought Bitcoin in that account, you kept it in there. All those client, displays added up to 1,500. They only had one Bitcoin. So that's a real example of paper Bitcoin. That's people literally giving them money, thinking they're buying Bitcoin, and FTX. Maybe they bought the Bitcoin for a second, but then they swapped it into some other nonsense, right? And tried to make money, or maybe they never bought the Bitcoin. So that's a real example of paper Bitcoin and suppressing the price. And that literally just happened 3 years ago. So number one, I think we need to keep our mind open that things like that could be happening. But then number two, look at what FTX was. I mean, it was like, what, a dozen kids all under the age of 30, a private company, what we now know was extremely limited controls in place and really bad motivations and activities that were happening over there. Then you just look at like, who are the big players that are executing trades now, doing custody, say what you will about Coinbase from like a marketing perspective. I think they're awful, but do I believe that Coinbase, the publicly traded company, is just like faking things in their books? Like, I don't really believe that. I don't believe Anchorage is doing that. I don't believe Fidelity is doing that. I don't believe BitGo is doing that. So generally speaking, I'm not a believer in the price suppression narratives. I would believe it more for an asset like gold, where the things that trade linked to gold are much more like derivatives and paper gold, like actual, ETF shares and things like that. But then the ETF itself, like who the hell knows what they have, what they don't have. And I just think the amount of people in the world that can and will take self-custody of their Bitcoin at a moment's notice, it's like, that's leaps and bounds greater than what could happen with gold. So, and even in gold, it's been hard for the gold bugs to like definitively prove like, hey, there's price suppression. And look what's happening with the price of gold now. Like no one's screaming price suppression of the price of gold today. So that's like my general thoughts on price suppression and paper Bitcoin and all this stuff. So yeah,
no, I mean,
take that for what you will.
So I agree with you. Would you going back to that, just more of like a FUD thing? Because I mean, like it or not, I mean, whether you're a Bitcoiner or not, I mean, you have to admit, people have to admit that political leaders have massive influence over society. I mean, that's just far and away that they're just, it is what it is. I mean, I might not like it. John might not like it. You might, listener might not like it, but whatever leaders say, people follow. I mean, we see it going back biblically, right? Like the chosen people walked around, they're like, give me a king, give me a leader. I want a leader. God was like, dude, you can be decentralized. Like you can just follow me. Like you have free will. and then just follow me. There's a couple simple commandments, and that's it. And they're like, nope, I want a king. I want a human. Like I want someone that looks like me. And here we are. So anyway, not before we derail and go off the rails. I feel like it's a lot of fudding. I feel like it's just a lot of psychology. Like you said, you can't point to like, oh, here's price suppression. Like you said, I mean, could there be an FTX thing going on? Yeah. But I mean, the great part is with Bitcoin, you can account for it very easily, right? Like you can't go forever that long with actual paper. Hey, we've got one Bitcoin. Eventually you blow yourself up, which trains society over time. Hey, maybe I shouldn't mess with Bitcoin. So I feel like it's more psychological than anything. Again, I go back to the AI energy usage right there. Like it just flips on a dime. All of a sudden you don't hear Bitcoin boiling the oceans, and again, that was media putting that out, controlled by who benefits from stuff like that. And now you just don't even hear about it. It's just like, well, energy, energy is good. Energy usage is good. I don't know, John.
Yeah. Well, you reminded me of one more thing on that, like, price isn't where it should be. And that's what a lot of us are feeling right now. But I would remind people last year what was happening. So you started 2024 with the ETFs launch, like within the first 2 weeks of the year, right? And then we had that fake out, like price started rising for like a day or something, and then price started falling. I think we were even below 40K Bitcoin price after the ETFs launched at some point in time, which is really crazy to think about.
That is.
Then there's this whole rotation. People were finally selling GBTC, and that caused significant drag on the price, like all this stuff. But I think there was a month or so where the price was really weak post the ETFs. And then after that, it was like off to the races. We rose above 70K for the first time. Again, this is all in Q1 of 2024. But then we crossed 70K for the first time. And then the rest of the year until the election, we basically bounced back and forth from like high 60K to like 58K for like the whole year. And I was fielding questions from my clients. And remember, just for perspective, I sit in a role where I do get to talk to people about Bitcoin all day long. Yeah. That means people who are our clients. Some of our clients have been in Bitcoin for 10 years. Some of our clients are just getting into Bitcoin and everything in between. So I hear a lot of different perspectives. And I was fielding a lot of questions last year as we kept bouncing from 69K to 58K and back and forth and back and forth. Mm-hmm. And they're like, this just feels wrong. Like the price should be higher. Mm-hmm. And, suppression, tell me about paper Bitcoin. What do you think's happening? And then the election happens. And then we go 70K, 80K, 90K, 100K. And then again, people are like, all right, this is the real price action. So I would just give that as an anecdote to me, that's kind of what feels like is going on right now. People are just saying, hey, this is not where the price is supposed to be. And maybe you're correct, but I also feel that anyone who's been relatively early to an investment is always going to have some feeling of, the price is not where, reflecting reality. It's like, yeah, it's not, because you're relatively early to this. Mm-hmm. And I would just say, ask yourself, has the thesis changed for Bitcoin whatsoever in the last year, in the last 6 months, 3 months, whatever period? I would say resoundingly no, the thesis has not changed at all. If anything, it's stronger than ever. I think we got more signals in 2025 that the option for some sort of deflationary bust or even a nominal decline in asset prices, it's just not on the table. From a political perspective, from a financial system perspective, allowing stocks or home prices, we can talk about the whole 50-year mortgage thing that's just coming out. Yeah. That them allowing stocks and home prices to decline for years on end, it's not politically possible. It's not economically possible because tax receipts would go down, and then it's not financially possible because stocks and real estate serve as collateral in so many parts of the system, and you would have financial entities failing left and right if we had like real estate prices go down for 5 years in a row, for example. So I think the whole whatever you want to call it, debasement trade, inflation is baked in the cake, all roads lead to currency debasement. We have different ways of referring to this, but in my opinion, all of that is as strong as ever. Bitcoin is a $2 trillion asset. It should be something orders of magnitude higher. Is it going to take, 3 more months to play out materially, or 9 more months or 12 more months? I don't know. But literally nothing has changed about my own Bitcoin thesis in the last 12 months.
All right, real talk for a second. We all know health insurance is basically a fiat system of healthcare. The biggest debauchery there is. It's expensive, confusing. Somehow you still end up paying hundreds of dollars for a Band-Aid. We moved to crowd sharing almost 5 years ago. It's the best decision we ever made. Instead of sending your money to the insurance company's black hole, you join a like-minded community that directly funds each other's medical bills. Simple, transparent, way cheaper, and that difference you save, you can invest in Bitcoin. It's an amazing win-win. And look, we're part of the Bitcoin community because we believe in freedom, decentralization. Crowd Health brings that same mindset to healthcare. You choose your doctor, you pay in cash, and the community's got your back when the big bills hit. No networks, no middlemen, no bureaucrats trying to approve your care, just people helping people the way it should be. You make decisions about your health. That's as sovereign as it gets. So if you're ready to take the orange pill for your health, this open enrollment, go to Join Crowd Health to get started for $99 for your first 3 months using code Brandon at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code Brandon. Crowd Health is not insurance. Opt out. Take your power back. This is how we win. Joincrowdhealth.com, code PLAY. Generational wealth doesn't happen by accident. As Bitcoiners, we have to live in two worlds, the fiat world and the Bitcoin world. We have to acknowledge that. Idealism versus pragmatism. Bitcoin fixed the money, but it didn't fix the system for protecting and passing it on. That's where Meanwhile comes in. First, Bitcoin-denominated life insurance company, regulated in Bermuda and built entirely by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. The company has flipped everything on its head, and you're going to be stunned at how simple they've made it, how no one saw this before. With Meanwhile, long-term holders can grow, protect their Bitcoin wealth through tax-free policy loans, no repayment obligation, no margin call risk, while making inheritance simple, secure, and easy, entirely in Bitcoin in case something happens to you. It's about sovereignty, stewardship, and building a legacy that lasts centuries. This stuff's incredibly important because if Bitcoin is forever, your plan should be too. Learn more at meanwhile.bm. That's meanwhile.bm, or check the link in the description below. If you haven't been living on in Iraq recently, you've seen that the world is completely changing. Seizures, freezing of assets, bail-ins, bailouts, everything and everyone are coming after your money, your time and energy, because the system is collapsing in and of itself. That's why Foundation created the Passport for. Bitcoin revolution is 2 words: self-custody. Custodying your assets in your mind. This generates the private key to store your wealth forever. This is the revolution. Foundation is built on sovereignty, freedom, and privacy. Go to foundation.xyz/Brandon for $10 off your Passport Core. This beautiful, sleek foundation wallet is everything you need. The ergonomics, the feel, the weight are absolutely incredible. It also comes with the free Envoy app. You can buy Bitcoin straight into self-custody, label and track your coins, send secure air-gap transactions in seconds. Beginner-friendly, but also powerful enough for the pros. Foundation is built for sovereignty, so you can take back control of your money in your digital life. Get started today, again, at foundation.xyz/Brandon for $10 off your Passport Core. Yeah, I couldn't agree. And that's honestly a lot of the different questions I had for you kind of spurred off of everything you just said in the last couple of minutes to a degree, right? This rotation, the whales selling over time, which is natural, but also leads into the questions of like, well, hey, there's lending now, why not lend against it? Or, hey, do we believe? And I know this gets into this greater question that I always have, as about me. You and I are similar in the sense of just U.S. history, buffs in that regard. Like thinking about those things, I think about the American Revolution a lot. We've talked about this, and the couple percent of people, the ones that are going to drag everyone else. I am hard, fast, and committed to it's only going to be a couple percent. And Swan's had this, for years now, right? 10 million Bitcoiners. A lot of that lines up, ironically, right? Or maybe not ironically. And so, you're going to have people that are selling out. They're going to go back into fiat. They're going to rotate into other things. And to me, it's because you're right. It's not about price. Again, there's multiple things here. One, I think, I'll shelve that for a second. One, I think it's tough. And this is where I love your thought on it. It's tough because you see so much information. Again, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, John, when we're getting into the space, if you had one of these days of news, I mean, the price would have went from, 1,000 or 500 to 5,000 overnight, 10,000, market smaller. But now I think we're almost take it for granted. There's so much good news, and it's this cognitive dissonance of well, why isn't price doubling now? Oh, we got more, 10 more great things the next day. And then people just have this disconnect where I hear good news all the time. It's all we've heard for 2 years. And Trump, we got a Bitcoin president and all these great things. And it's just how is the price just languishing, relatively speaking, to all the news that we would have died for 10 years ago, five years ago?
Yeah, I am certainly sympathetic to that. And I think what's making it even harder for people this year is that it's one thing if you go through a 2022 year and the S&P 500 is down, everybody lost money in 2022, right? If you made money, you had some sort of oil trade on, or gold might have been flat that year. Basically everybody lost money in 2022. And if you look around and you say, all right, it's a down year, fastest rate hiking cycle in history, highest inflation in 40 years, everybody's losing money left and right, then it kind of doesn't sting as much if your asset, Bitcoin here, is not where it's quote unquote supposed to be, right? But I think what stings for people so much this year is that they're seeing gold up, whatever it is, 40%. S&P is outperforming Bitcoin year to date. QQQ is outperforming Bitcoin year to date. There's some other individual stocks in like the AI compute world that are doing very well. And I think people are looking at that and saying like, all right, something feels off here. But I again would just look back to like, if you were an early investor in Amazon or Nvidia, or I mean, any company that was in an earlier stage, there were undoubtedly periods where you're looking at the company's results and you just have this vision for what the company is going to do, who their client base is going to be, what they sell, how big their revenue is going to be one day. And you're probably looking at the stock price and saying like, this doesn't make sense. Like, everything's trending in the direction I thought it would, but the stock price is not reflecting reality. And I think that's a moment like this for Bitcoin. But again, I keep going back to 2024. I don't think people should think like, oh my gosh, something's wrong with Bitcoin. This has never happened before. Our expectations are off from reality. And that's why I gave all those anecdotes of last year, because I'm like, I was fielding calls left and right when we hit 58K yet again. And everyone's like, how are we below 60K with all this good news that's happening? And it's like, okay, so sometimes you just have to wait for a few months. So I just look at like the adoption that's happening, even just like recent headlines. I'm not sure if you saw this one in the last few days, but one of the on-chain analysts were reporting that the Trump Media and Technology Group, which I guess is the DJT company, so they did a 10Q filing. They own like 11,000 Bitcoin, something like that. And the acquisition of 11,000 Bitcoin. So I'm not even sure what the total is they own. But anyway, it's to your point of like, if a news item like that dropped, like the president's own company is buying tens of $1,000s worth of Bitcoin, like in any other era, it would have been like, wait a minute, what? Like Bitcoin's here. What more do you want? So on the one hand, I get that people are frustrated and something seems not, there seems to be some sort of disconnect. But I really think the answer is patience here. And I think things will make themselves pretty clear as time goes on. Again, I don't know if that means 1 month or 3 months or 9 months, but I think a little patience is warranted.
Yeah, and again, I want to be clear too. It's not that it's not something. And again, I'm gonna hopefully not put words in your mouth, but whether price goes up or down is immaterial, or I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think how to say it. It's not. I'm not sitting here like, I want $1 million so we can get a Lambo. So John and I go buy a Lambo. That's not it. I think the reason that so many Bitcoiners, and again, I'm speaking for you two here, but I know you enough that you believe the same way. It's like, you hope price gets to a certain point that it slaps a percent of the population in the face to say, what the hell is going on here? That is, for me, that's why I want price up. I could really care less. Like, I don't care. Like, if it goes to 1 million, like that's great. I want friends and family. I want people around us, clients of yours, like all these people to be able to get off the hamster wheel. That feels amazing. That will feel amazing. But really the grand story to me is the government's waking up, having something they have to answer to, right? Some type of merit and accountability and responsibility, for crying out loud. I mean, that to me is what the Bitcoin price signifies. And it's smacking people in the face every 10 grand, every 50, 100 grand that it goes up. It's a segment of society having to wake up and then accept that reality that we've all had to. And it's not that, we woke up out of bed one day and it had some vision. We're like, you know what, this is it. And we just lucked into it. We all have to go through that gauntlet. And I think that's where, we were talking offline. We've had talks about these social events in North Carolina and the Charlie Kirk thing, where these things happen. And it's just like, guys, how are we creating this disaster for ourselves and this civil unrest? And it's because it's broken money that you hope that Bitcoin, the best thing we've had to fix all that. And you're like, can we start waking more people up? And the price, fear and greed is the best way to do that, right? So if price going up or chaos happening, unfortunately. So anyway, I just wanted to be clear about that, because it's not, price is a means to an end, right? It's not like, we want price because of price, because we don't even want fiat. We don't even want fiat. 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. So anyway, I get your thought on that, but I wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, you and I are aligned there. And on some time horizon, the price does have to go up to signify the success of Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
If it just stayed at 100,000 forever, it actually still does have some value because it would still be a decentralized, permissionless monetary transfer network where you can send funds across the globe without permission, without relying on a central party. That still is actually pretty freaking awesome and valuable.
Yeah.
But as many Bitcoiners have talked about, the whole protecting your wealth from debasement, from inflation, creating generational wealth that nobody can, take from you, or it's very difficult to take from you. That is just one of the most valuable things for humanity. So that is what we ultimately want. And actually, maybe this would be something kind of interesting to explore a little bit. And you could probably tell based on how I just answered or how I phrased that, it's like protection from debasement to me is the core of what Bitcoin is delivering for people. And I would love to get your take a little bit on the fix the money, fix the world thesis, which maybe I'm just a little too down in the dumps at this particular moment in time. And you can, talk me off the ledge if you want to. But my general view at this point in time, I'm not hating on that phrase too much. I want to make that clear. I think it's a good phrase. You need marketing phrases like that, punchy lines that get a point across, right?
Memeable.
But I do think there is a problem in taking that phrase too literally, because I think it might make some people think that it's that easy. It's like, oh, you just, get a few more people to adopt Bitcoin and fix the world, fix the problems of whatever the problems are, too much government spending, foreign wars, domestic problems. One of the things you mentioned that happened in recent months is an innocent person gets stabbed on a train by somebody who's been arrested, 20 times or whatever it is, right? Yep. A little bit more Bitcoin adoption doesn't solve that.
Right.
There's real problems and one thing I always point to actually is the different parts of the world have had a sound money regime at different points in time, right? It was just precious metals. It obviously wasn't Bitcoin, but the US had a sound money regime at the beginning of its founding. There, gold and silver served as money. There was a 1792 Coinage Act, which kind of fixed a bunch of weights and measures of different precious metals. And they said, this is the money, right? And yeah, they banks might have been able to issue credit, but a dollar was still linked to something. It was not fiat, right? We're hundreds of years away from that. But you know what we also had in the 1790s and 1800s? We had proven criminals get hanged. Yep. So it's like, fix the money, fix the world. Right. Yeah, it's like you can't just be like, oh, we have sound money and now like nobody commits a crime anymore. Nobody's going to invade someone else anymore. Like you still need honorable, reasonable people in government willing Absolutely. To protect innocent citizens. And if you don't have that, then just having a money that can't be debased is not going to fix it, especially given where we're at now. Like even if Bitcoin adoption keeps like going up and up and up, like we all want to see, I don't think that takes away the US dollar and the treasuries as a reserve asset and the core part of the financial system anytime soon. So I think, to kind of wrap up that long rant, I think the main benefit of Bitcoin is much more at the individual level and the family level. It's about you protecting your wealth and your family's wealth from inflation or seizure or censorship. And the fix the money, fix the world thesis, again, I think it's nice because it gets people thinking about how money affects the world. But unfortunately, I don't think Bitcoin is anywhere close to fixing those problems that are a problem all over the world.
Yeah, and just to throw another one out there too, the Bitcoin is inevitable thing. I have a real problem with that. Again, we need these memes in order to just to be, like you said, quick and punchy and to market Bitcoin, right? But Bitcoin is not inevitable. It's a human system, and Sailors talked about this. And if people don't care about sound money, then it won't propagate. We won't have, and you mentioned it earlier, again, the price, even if it stays 100,000, like that's great, but it has to justify the value of that network. And so, if people don't care, the machines might, the software code might run for 1,000 years on its own. It could run in the corner, maybe AI is using it or something like that. But if humans aren't using it at the end of the day and we don't care about sound money, then it doesn't matter. And so it's not inevitable. You have to educate yourself. You have to fight for it. You have to figure out what's going on. And that's like, well, there's not a Bitcoin culture. It's not a Bitcoin community. And like people, I feel like there's a lot of Bitcoiners that are very black pilled and then just like, which again, I empathize with. I think we've all been there, especially again, the last few months, there's a lot going on. And these tropes, these euphemisms, you have to be very careful with it. There's a double-edged sword with a lot of them, to your point. So, and in saying that, I forget what founding father it was, John Adams or one of them, who talked about, again, to have this, which they were on a sound money standard at that time, right? So I know people complain about, well, it's gold or silver or something like that. So, it's not totally sound. So, they talked about this experiment won't work unless you have a moral, religious, just society upholding it. It won't work. And here we are. So like, to your point, Bitcoin won't fix everything in the world. We're still a fallen world. We're still going to have problems. And it is, naive to think like, oh, just the money is just going to fix all that. There's a lot of work that comes with that. And whether it's to education up front, to understanding that the money is broken and how it incentivizes all of society, to your main macro point of, hopefully the prison system or whatever it is, these incentives can change so that people aren't incentivized to do worse and worse things, or we don't have the money, the governments, and we're so bankrupt, we don't even have the ability to keep out predators. We don't have the ability to like protect ourselves. We don't, well, sorry, don't have money, like every man for himself. That's going back to wild west times, so again, to your point, bringing it full circle. Yeah. I think Bitcoin helps decentralize things, but also like you said, the family and just, these decentralized locales, citadels almost. I think there's a lot of change coming in the next 50 to 100 years. I think there's a lot of this change because of Bitcoin and what it's going to do. So yeah, no, it's such a great point though. And I've been thinking about the inevitable thing too. Some of these tropes that are just, they're double-edged swords.
For sure. And I do recognize I am probably coming across as very black-pilled at the moment, but I also just want to be genuine and be, maybe that's how I'm feeling a little bit at the moment. And I do, it really has nothing to do with Bitcoin's price. I want to be clear. Like if Bitcoin were at 135K today, I would be saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. My comments are much more like big picture comments. And to your point about one of the founding fathers, it was John Adams. I think the quote is, "Our Constitution is made for a moral and religious people. It's wholly unsuitable for any other." So yeah, to the extent that you're a fan of this constitutional republic, which has elements of voting in it, our system today, and individual liberties and all that good stuff, the people who designed that system that you like so much literally told you, hey, this only works if you have a particular type of people. And that's a really, really important point. And then again, just to reiterate what we said, that some of the taglines are valuable. You need taglines to market any company, any movement, you need them. But the fix the money, fix the world. It's don't take it too literally, because the world needs a lot of fixing, and the money is a huge part of it. And trust me, I again, just to underscore, I don't want to come across as like being down on the idea of sound money. Take it from someone who was literally reading the Mises Institute in like 2008 and 2009. And the word Bitcoin wasn't even there. It was all about, because remember, Austrian economists have been talking about sound money for decades, Mises doing it over 100 years ago. So in some sense, these are not like fix the money, fix the world is not really a new concept. Ron Paul has the line, it's no coincidence that the 20th century is the century of central banking and the century of total war. Like these concepts have been out there for a long time. And I wholeheartedly believe in those concepts. I am just saying that there are a bunch of problems in the world that getting some more people to adopt Bitcoin, or Bitcoin quadrupling in value, does not fix those problems. And I think we just need to be realistic about that.
Yeah, it's such a great point, because again, even if Bitcoin went to 1 million tomorrow or 10 million, it clearly, like, you can be, if you have two brain molecules to rub together, I mean, again, you can see that, of course, it's not going to clean everything up, right? Like this is going to take time. It's going to take work and effort and energy. I know there are words that none of us like to hear, but that's such is the case. Anyway, okay. So I want to talk about the Jordy Visser thing, the IPO moment with you. Some of this, the rotation of coins a little bit. What you talked about with Lynn Alden the other day. We're going to talk about Mandami later. in New York City. So John's in New York City for those of you who don't know. But again, this is, what you see in Europe a lot of times, and then, maybe in New York City or maybe some West Coast cities generally starts, it's like that precursor, it's canary in the coal mine a lot of times for what's going to happen in the rest of the world. So talk about that later. And some of the treasury company stuff with Saylor, I want to talk to you about. But right now, I want to get your thoughts on this 50-year mortgage, because I always had a thought. I mean, it was years ago. I mean, 5-10 years ago. And I know they floated out like 100-year mortgage at some point, or, something to that effect, or 100-year bond, maybe. I can't remember what it was, but I know that was floated out somewhere at some point. So I would love your thoughts on, because it just felt inevitable on the 50-year mortgage and what's going on here.
Yeah, I think this is, example number 8,000 that points to they are not willing nor able to let real estate prices fall for years on end or stock prices fall for years on end, because those two things are a political nightmare. Because even though I am in agreement that older wealthy asset owners have benefited tremendously at the expense of younger people who don't have any retirement funds, don't have any brokerage account, don't have a home. And it's like almost every political decision, whether from the Treasury or from the Fed over the last 25 years, has been aimed at making sure that those wealthy asset owners, that their wealth goes up by a healthy amount, like every single year, pretty much. And that comes at the expense of those younger people who don't own assets. So I'm very sympathetic to that point of view. I also think Bitcoiners are correct to point out that younger people, they don't understand that, but they feel something is wrong. And then they're willing to vote for somebody who just became a citizen in 2018, basically hates America in his rhetoric, and is an outright socialist as the mayor of the biggest city in the country. Yeah. So I'm actually sympathetic to young people kind of being confused. They have a feeling that something is wrong, and they're going with someone who they think is going to fix it. Spoiler alert, I don't think he's going to fix it, but that's how people are voting. But coming back to the mortgages, I think it's just another example that they the powers that be for now are seeing, hey, we do have to do something to make homes incrementally more affordable. Keyword, incrementally more affordable. What would really make homes more affordable is letting the price of real estate fall and not bailing out the real estate market every time that there's a potential downturn. But they don't do that. So instead, they say, let's make them incrementally more affordable. So a 50-year mortgage lowers your payment by a little bit every month, right? A younger person just says, okay, I guess this is a bit of a win for me because I can afford a home that I couldn't have afforded otherwise because the payment is a few $100s cheaper. But what does that also do? The price of the home stay supported. So your boomers, your wealthy asset owners are like, okay, this is fine for me. Price stays up. That's what they're doing. They're threading this needle between saying, hey, we can't let asset prices fall materially, but we need to throw some sort of bone to young people to make houses look more affordable. And I think that is what's happening here. Also, I will just say it's like compounding the problem in a way, because if you do this and you lock people into these 50-year mortgages, and now the banks are underwriting 50-year mortgages, you're basically guaranteeing that home prices is like a government subsidized asset forever. Like if 50-year mortgage start becoming normalized, they are in no position to allow home prices to fall materially. Like they're just going to have to keep playing this game forever. So, and again, that's also why I'm so bullish on Bitcoin and have been forever, but still am. You see this thing, and to me, it's just a big flashing sign of like, look, guys, they're gonna keep inflating assets. And this is just the latest foray into it. Maybe last comment, just to throw a bone to them. They don't really have great options, because if they did let home prices correct by 30, 40, 50%, boomers would be screaming about it. It's a huge political problem, and it's a financial problem and an economic problem, because there are institutions that invest in real estate, residential mortgage-backed securities and agency mortgage-backed securities and all these different types of things, that if home prices fall by 30, 40, 50%, that doesn't work for those investments. And then Also, if home prices were to fall by 30, 40, 50%, that affects a bunch of industries in terms of home builders and all these knock-on effects of tax receipts and things like that. So I really don't think they have an option to let home prices fall and let homes become more affordable that way. So instead, they have to play these games of saying, well, what if we do a 50-year mortgage and lower your payment by $300 a month? And again, that those are the games they're playing. It's all within a system where they say we have to keep debasing the currency. We have to keep allowing asset prices to rise. And over the long term, Bitcoin will benefit from this.
Now that you have your hardware wallet, the key data generated needs to be stored in something forever that can withstand fire, flood, nuclear fallout, checks, hockey pucks. This is your 12-word C plate, your 24-word C plate. After a lot of people asking for your 12-word C plate, here it is, stampseed.com, code Brandon for 15% off. After everything that's going on in the world, fires we've seen in the Pacific Palisades, what we've seen happen in Hawaii, everything gone. Titanium seed plates withstands everything. Your posterity will thank you. It only takes a few minutes. Don't let these little things, these small investments scare you from the most important aspects of Bitcoin and the first money we have ever conceived here on earth. Stampseed.com, code Brandon for 15% off. Everything you are learning in this episode is completely moot and does not matter. If you hold Bitcoin and are still leaving it on an exchange or sharing keys and your KYC information with a third party, this is your wake-up call now. You are only self-sovereign if you alone hold the keys to your wealth. 100% self-custody sounds daunting at first. Believe me, I lost 2 years of massive gains over a decade ago because I was worried about taking the few minutes it took to understand self-custody. And that's exactly why you need to talk to my friends, Tony Yazbek and his team at the Bitcoin Way. We just interviewed Tony recently, has over 80,000 views, an overwhelming response. People love his story and the simplicity he shares of how easy it is to custody and take ownership of the greatest money we've ever seen. They'll train you to do it right the first time. Head on over to thebitcoinway.com/Brandon to schedule a free 30-minute consultation today. Their 5-star rated service is exactly what you need. Quit sitting on your hands like I did and get started today. Again, that's thebitcoinway.com/BRANDON. Yeah, it's akin to the Nixon shock, and taking gold out of the money. It's like, everyone blames Nixon, but it's like, well, I mean, it was baked into the cake. What else was he gonna do, really? I mean, he's like, just drain everything and it's gone, and then what? I don't know. It's weird. There aren't good options, like you said. You kind of have to do this. And my question, I guess, is is it just like a demographic cliff we hit at some point over the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, where the younger generations are like, yeah, we're not doing this, and just a slow chipping away at the iceberg until it flips one day where people are just like, yeah, I'm not doing this, because it does just feel like we keep kicking the can down the road. We keep elonging it. Hey, you're in bondage now for 30 years. Now it's 50 years. Then it'll be 100 years. And probably 5, 10, 15 years, it'll be 100-year mortgage, like we were just saying, because this is going to speed up the debt cliff. The exponential debt, it just keeps climbing. So at what point do things really change where people are like, I've had it. There's got to be another answer, because at some point there's got to be that couple percent that wake up, right? Hopefully, right, John? Right?
Yeah. I do love the conversations kind of about like, what is the breaking point? What is the end game? And because that's where my mind goes as well. Anytime you look at a system where you say, hey, this is unsustainable, there has to be a breaking point. There has to be an end game. There has to be some dramatic change that happens. And while I do think that is true conceptually, I also think we need to recognize how long cans can be kicked down the road and how long Band-Aids and duct tape can be thrown at something. What I think is going to be different about the US is that I like the analogy of the US looking more like an emerging market, and the crises look like emerging market crises, where people do just get more and more dissatisfied. Inflation kind of happens. You don't get a deflationary bust. You get a kind of like something that feels like a recession, but because they paper over it with currency debasement and spending, it may not show up in GDP the way it normally does. It may not show up in mass unemployment, but everybody feels more and more squeezed every single year. Young people are getting more and more pissed. You get reactions like what we see in New York, with an outright socialist being elected, and then a bunch of promises and taxing the wealthy. And, again, to a certain extent, I'm kind of sympathetic to believe it or not, this is not something normally my viewpoint would say, but I'm much more sympathetic to like taxing the wealthy, just given the system that we've had.
You know,
Again, I don't
makes
think it's
sense.
going to
Like I know
result in a
why
good.
yeah. I know why people are,
Yeah,
feeling that way for,
exactly. I kind of get that motivation. I just don't think it's going to play out well, because it would be one thing if it was just a straight up redistribution. If it was just like, hey, we're going to tax and like give, I could get on board more with that, to be honest with you, rather than what I think is a huge problem is that so much of this will result in XYZ government program. And once
yeah,
you have the government running something, that's more than just a redistribution. Now,
right.
now it's career bureaucrats that are, doing this thing. And you can't ever get rid of the government program, even if
Yep.
there's a flip to the other political aisle 10 years from now. It's just going to be
Yep.
like, oh, we can't run on getting rid of that government program. It's so, we'll be so unpopular if we get rid of it. So now it's there forever. Now there's this layer of bureaucracy, and now there's these people who run the thing, and like it's not going to end in a good place. Even if young people have been getting screwed by the system, I don't think these fixes are going to end up in a good place. But just to your point about like where do we go from here, and is there a breaking point? I don't know. I think I don't know what that breaking point would be, other than inflation.
Mm-hmm.
I just I try to think about like, what do these end games look like, and I think also in emerging markets, you get like drastic policy changes. Whether, someone tries to say, hey, you all have to work 3 more years now because the system is kind of collapsing on itself.
Mm-hmm.
You might see stuff like that, but look how the people react when that happens. People go in the
Over in
streets
Europe.
and,
Yeah. Was that
light
France?
cars on fire when they're, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When they're told they have to work like 3 more years, which is also an insane Bitcoin point, because that's so apparent to them. If you literally tell them, hey, you're supposed to work till 67, now you're working till 70, anybody with 2 brain cells can calculate what that means to them, right? But if you
Yes.
take 3 years of their time and their wealth through inflation, you're doing it stealth, and they don't ride in the street from that, right? So I think it'll be stealth forms of screwing people over, and maybe just more of the same. But I really don't see a breaking point for the US. I think we just see more of the same for many years to come.
Yeah, it's funny because like no one knows the breaking point, right? Like, because my mind always goes to what is the breaking point. I've asked so many people that over the years, and I just realized eventually like that's just a dumb question, because like no one knows. If someone knew, then they'd run the world, I guess. I don't know, like, because you had the subprime stuff blow up, right? You had the repo stuff in 2019, which ironically, now that we are sitting here today, kind of rearing its head again a little bit. People I know the last week or two have been a little bit unnerved about the repo situation looking like 2019 potentially type of thing, which we get your thoughts on here in a second for sure. But it does feel like it might be self-imposed in a way where it's like you said, government changing rules because things have to be so violently swung back and forth. Like the next time AOC's in power and the pendulum keeps like swinging like harder and harder, like hopefully it doesn't, but it's just like, well, here we voted this guy in New York City, and then like AOC's president next time, and that just keeps swinging, and you're gonna have like these radical changes in government. And then people are, and because that was the beauty of the United States. People think like, well, the government's not doing anything. Well, we've crossed that Rubicon in my eyes, to where like people think government's there to do something, right? Or like JFK said, ask not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country. And now it's like, well, what is the government doing for me? It's like, no, that's not. Government was supposed to be very slow. That's why there's 3 branches and there's separate equal powers, because nothing was supposed to get done. We are so wildly opposite of like how we were founded that the average person just thinks like, well, what are you doing for me? What's going on? Voting the next guy, he's going to get this next policy for me. And it's just, we are so backwards. But ironically, maybe that's where it comes from. Maybe it's some like, hey, they're upping the retirement age, or they're doing something where it just like sparks off, like people are like, whoa, I'm done.
Yeah. You just made me think of one interesting thread, obviously related to Bitcoin, but also related to like the speed of things changing. Are we reaching an end game? And also the fourth turning thesis, which I know you must be familiar with. So what I think is super interesting, because there's something to be said about, okay, end game is probably not the right term, because it makes you think like we're all headed to like a point in time, right? And we're all going to look around and be like, oh, there it is, this the end game we've all been waiting for, right? This is it. So that, that's not how the world works, right? Like, the joke about men loving to talk about Roman history, Rome in hindsight was deemed to have fallen in the year 476 AD. I think I have that right. And but there, if you were a Roman citizen walking around Rome in 476 AD, you were not talking to your buddies like, "Hey man, isn't this crazy? We're alive the year that Rome is falling." Like that's not what it was. They didn't pass out newspapers that said, "Hey, Rome's falling today."
Man.
It was like, I think I should look this up, but I think it was hundreds of years later that the historians looked back and said, "You know what? If we were going to say a year that Rome fell, it was probably 476 AD for various reasons."
Mm-hmm.
So that type of framework is always important to keep in mind when you're thinking about quote unquote end games. With that caveat, I will say this, that there are, even though there are not end games, history is not linear at the same time. That's also not true, right? It's also not just gradual, little bit brick in the wall type stuff, because there are massive changes. Some of those massive changes would be like 1933, gold gets confiscated, and then gold gets revalued, the dollar gets devalued, right? Like that's a massive, basically overnight change. The other one, which everybody knows, 1971, or maybe I should rewind even first, the creation of a Federal Reserve in 1913. Like that's a massive change. That's not your average week or day. Like that's a big deal.
Right.
Then 1933, seizure and devalue. Then 1971, just remove the peg entirely, right? These are all like big deals. What I wanted to relate it to the fourth turning was because if you look at the fourth turnings in US history, the first one's the Revolution, the second one is the Civil War, and the third one is World War II. And what I think is super interesting, tying it into monetary things, is, and also just individual liberties. So in the first one and the second one, people had ended those fourth turnings with much more individual liberties, and we actually got back to sound money. So the American Revolution and the Civil War resulted in more liberty and sound money. But what did the next fourth turning result in? The next fourth turning resulted in unsound money and more government overreach, like the New Deal programs that we still exist with today. So to me, that's fascinating because it made it seem like the fourth turning is just like this cyclical thing, like, oh, we're go through the same pattern. So it's like, well, hold on a minute. What we were led into after the first two fourth turnings was completely different than what we were led to after this fourth turning. And then what I think is also interesting is that we are going into a fourth turning with fiat for the first time ever. So historically, you would have sound money, a war would come, you might get fiat during the war, like creating a currency just to, fund the war effort. But then after the war's over, they're like, hey guys, the war's over. Let's go back to sound money. Mm-hmm. Now, I think we're in uncharted territory because we are in a fourth turning, but we've had fiat for 54 years. Yeah. So to me, that's another one where I don't see like a big end game. I see it just being like much more elongated because I don't see there being like some drastic, the move to fiat already happened. Like that genie is out of the bottle. So I'm just trying to make the case, I guess, for like much less of an end game type philosophy and much more of a kick the can down the road, Band-Aids and duct tape. Like expect that for the coming decades.
Yeah. And it does feel like, boy, they can just keep that football field doesn't end. They can just keep kicking and the goalposts just keep moving and going back and back and back. It's really wild. I love that breakdown though, of just even the wars and stuff like that. That's fascinating. I haven't put it all together and looked at it that way. So I'm gonna have to dig into that some more. I want to get your thoughts on some of the topic of the day, just with the Jordi Visser piece of like the IPO moment and some of like the rotation we've seen of coins over the last year or two. Again, you brought up a great point the other day. It's not just 2025, it's 2024. There's actually, a little bit more going on in 2024. So I would love your thoughts just on that and what we're seeing with the price being what it is because of, some real factors that are going on, quite honestly. And I know his piece got a lot of headway over the last couple of weeks here.
Yeah. I think he overall, I think it makes sense. His piece makes sense. I think people shouldn't take it too literally as if it's an IPO, like because an IPO for a stock, literally has a date when it IPOs. So it's not, it's an analogy, which means it's going to be good in some ways, but not
It's
a
like the
one
Rome
for one type of
example.
thing.
You look back in like a year from now, I'm like, oh, it was around that date. Yeah, it's on an
Exactly.
actual date.
Exactly. And then exactly. And you brought up what I think is a good point that we were raising with Lynn, which is it's not even, people might feel like it's a 2025 phenomenon because there's been way more posts about OG selling, big Bitcoin moves on chain. Galaxy sells 9 billion for one person in one day, or whatever it was. And these headlines have just been nonstop. So one might think that 2025 is the year that this is happening. But if you look, there was a ton of older Bitcoin, I think defined by like at least hasn't moved for 5 years on chain, that was moved and presumably sold. Again, a lot of this is assumptions, by the way. When someone moves their Bitcoin, they don't include a note that says why they're moving their Bitcoin. So just keep that in mind. But if these on-chain methods are somewhat accurate, there was a ton of Bitcoin moved and presumably sold in 2024 as well. And I think it makes sense, but at the same time, I do think there are some caveats. I don't know about you, but I still have a hard time making sense of the 9 billion sold by the Galaxy team on allegedly on behalf of one individual, because
That was the
if
80,000
you had
coins, right,
$9
John?
billion, yeah, that
That
was
was
the
the
80,000
80,000. Yeah.
coins that Galaxy did a press
Yeah.
release and said we sold these. And
Yeah.
the reason why I have a hard time comprehending that is, what would you do with $9 billion? Like, how would you reallocate that? What, choose whatever you want to do. You want to build a hockey rink in your backyard. You want to, donate to some charities. You want to make sure your kids are set up. Like, it
Sports
would be
team.
difficult to find a
Yeah.
home for $9 billion. What some friends have mentioned to me and said, oh, well, what if a guy died? Or what if he got divorced? And what if it was like the issue got forced? And I said, you know what? That to me is the most compelling explanation for why 9 billion might have had to change hands so quickly. So there's questions about this kind of OG selling narrative. But to answer your question in general, I think the concept that Jordy Visser outlined about, hey, look, when an asset goes up and has liquidity and hits new all-time highs, you're going to see some rotation. I think that's the same for any asset on earth.
Really quick side tangent of this. So the Jeff Booth, the thing that always strikes me, and again, you know me, and I tend to be on the more revolutionary side of things. And hey, we're gonna lead the charge. I'm gonna die on this hill, and someone's got to pull society some direction. And I know I'm not alone in that. There's not tons of us out there, obviously, right? But that's something I know you feel an inkling toward that, obviously. And I can think of many people in the Bitcoin space that do, and that's why I get along with them very well. But we have to live in these two worlds, and that's the thing that I struggle with a lot, which is living in this idealistic world, in this pragmatic world of like some of the whales selling, or if it's someone like us or whoever it is, where you have to live in this fiat world to a degree. But at the same time, you're trying to push that forward. Like, how do you strike that balance? And I had Jeff Booth on like a month ago, and like our entire hour and 40 minutes was spent basically breaking this down. And, for anyone who knows Jeff Booth, I mean, obviously he's like, hey, like any energy you're putting into this fiat world, like you're just giving it more energy. It's just going to keep existing. And this is the thing that I cannot get out of my head, John. It's like this ping pong back and forth, and kind of what we're talking about today of like these societal unrest, like what's going on versus just, hey, just going all in Bitcoin. And then you feel like alone because there's not a lot of people just like, oh, I'm just all in on Bitcoin. And you feel like, well, why am I doing it? No one else is doing it. And like, I'm just kind of like losing, but you're not like I mean, look at Jeff, right? Like all these opportunities, this abundance comes to you because you're in the Bitcoin space, but it's this psychological barrier people have to get through to get to that world of like, hey, I'm in this world. And it goes back to like, I'm going to interview Joe Carlosari here soon. And it's like him and Hodl go back and forth on like, macro is all one trade, Joe. Like, why are you learning all this stuff? And him and those two fight about it. And I tend to lie on the Hodl side where I'm like, yeah, it's all going to one. It's all correlated to one. So like, why are we putting energy in this world? Like, let's just go into Bitcoin. But then you look behind you, like no one's coming after you. Like no one's doing it. These are like, I don't know. I don't know what my question is necessarily, but other than just how do we balance that? Like that's the thing that I think that's the Bitcoin question of our day that again, I just don't see that much out there.
It's a great one, man. I think Because to a certain extent, I certainly agree. It's like the things you put energy into and time into, and or just like adoption, right? Like if you
Hmm.
continue to use every single fiat financial instrument under the sun, it's like, all right, well then you can't really complain when fiat continues to exist, right? Like you're you're helping all this
Right.
happen. But so
Oh.
I get that, but then at the same time, I'm also not really of the belief that it's feasible for Bitcoin at this point in time, keywords at this point in time, to really like fully take the reins from fiat.
Hmm.
Uh, that just one example would be if you had an opportunity to get a 2.275 mortgage for 30 years to buy a home in 2021, like you're probably supposed to take that. Like it's
Yeah.
actually good for you and your family to take it. I guess you could kind of take the moral high ground and be like, I'm not going to do that. But now you're in a situation where like you're kind of disadvantaging
Hmm.
yourself and your family just because you want to say, I don't want to use fiat at all.
Yeah.
Like I would respect it in a certain way, but I don't know if that's really the right answer. So I mean, maybe the answer is just aligning reality with your expectations a little more. For like, look, I want the whole world to be using Bitcoin and Lightning and eCash. I really do.
Yep. Yeah.
But do I think we're anywhere close to the point where that could feasibly happen from a tech perspective, from a user experience perspective, also from like a personal responsibility perspective? We talked about
Yeah.
the John Adams quote about citizens needing to be of a certain moral and religious standard for the Constitution to work. It's like we all kind of agree that that's not what the populace is of the United States
Right.
at this point in time. And I think that has implications for money too. It's like most people don't want to use a self-sovereign money. Like I think we just have to come to terms with that reality. Now, last thing I'll say is there's still this question of like, what are you going to do to try to advance Bitcoin adoption? And I don't think that, even though I just said everything I said, I don't think that means you have to like sit on your hands and do nothing. I still love having conversations with people that are just like, hey, you know how inflation happens every single year? Like it wasn't always this way. Like look at what inflation was before 1971, before 1913.
Hmm.
We literally don't have to live in a world where the dollar gets devalued every year. It's a relatively recent phenomenon. Um, what was the guy's, was it Patrick Henry who said death and taxes?
Mm.
I think this one should get talked about more often. He said death and taxes. He didn't say inflation. You know
Right.
why? Because inflation was not a given at that point in time. They
Yeah.
didn't live in a world back then where they said everything has to get more expensive every year. Inflation is a phenomenon of the last
uh,
100 years. So I still love talking to people about this stuff, and I'm going to keep doing it, but I also don't want to be under an illusion that it's like, all right, if John just talks to a few more people about Bitcoin and they adopt Bitcoin, that like fiat's going to go away soon. I think we just need to ground our expectations in reality on that.
all right. So, this rotation of what was happening and just this 80,000 coins and just the rotation in general, it feels like this, around 100,000 here. It's been, basically between 100, 120 for really the last year, I guess, right? I mean, all 2025, it's just been ping ponging back and forth. It feels very healthy. I mean, it feels like a very strong base, does it not? Like it feels like, hey, with all this happening, that base, it has to build those bases and the for price to springboard off of that. So it seems very healthy, is it not?
I think it is. And as you're saying that, I was just pulling up my one minor stat that I like to check, but and I haven't updated it in a bit. But if you look at the number of days that the price was above 60K in 2021, I know I don't have the stats in front of me, but it was not a lot. Like we Bitcoin hit 60K and crossed 60K in 2021, but it was really like weeks worth of time that Bitcoin spent above 60K, and then otherwise it was coming back down. And then you look at the number of days that Bitcoin has been above 100K since it last crossed. It was like the first week of December last year when it first crossed 100K. And really, like most of this year, it has spent above 100K. And to me, that is very healthy. Does it mean that maybe it's going to be harder to see Bitcoin like double and triple in like 6 months time? Because remember, Bitcoin was like 12K in late 2020 at some point. Like
Yeah.
I think in December 2020 it was like 12K, and then in the springtime, so just like 4 or 5 months later, it hit 60K.
Yeah.
So those like 5X's in 5 months, probably not going to see that again for Bitcoin. You could if there's some like crazy adoption headline.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a much more mature asset. We're above 2 trillion in market cap. And I do think it's healthy. The fact that you can see people sell tens of thousands of Bitcoin and the price is still above 100K, to me is another reason to be bullish.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What are your thoughts on just Saylor in general? Like kind of a broad brush, the treasury companies, obviously they've been getting hammered, kind of this whole malaise, just everything that's been going on the last, really handful of months, just socially, economically, just a lot of weird stuff going on. So what do you see? I mean, is it just across the treasury space, whether it's people coming in, the existing players, strategy, Saylor, that I know they have some new offerings again. He's behind the curtain, and they're drumming up new things seemingly every week, it seems like. So give me your rundown on what's going on in the treasury world.
Yeah, I think if you look back, rewind the clock to Q4 of last year or Q1 of this year, basically it was like the strategy and the Bitcoin treasury company strategy in general was like could do no wrong, right? Totally hot. Anyone is going to do this. There's going to be hundreds of them. Like that was the narrative at the time. And since then, it's gone ice cold, and people are like, "Oh, it's only strategy, and even strategy is going to have a 1.1 mNAV, and everyone else is going to fail." Like that's the narrative now. And I do believe the truth is somewhere in the middle. I don't think we get back to these. And I only follow the space like loosely. So I couldn't even tell you the number, but I know a company like Metaplanet traded to some nutty MNAV, right? Like I think it was like 10 or 15x MNAV. I really don't think we're getting back to that. But I think the people who are saying, oh, MNAVs are never going to be above 1.5 ever again, like they're probably wrong too. Just wait until Bitcoin is ripping. And then also just like look at what the numbers on some of these strategies are. If you can borrow at a rate of 8, 10, 12% and acquire a whole bunch of Bitcoin and increase your Bitcoin per share, and Bitcoin goes up at 20, 30, 40, 50% per year, like the numbers just literally are that you deserve some sort of MNAV and you're going to increase Bitcoin per share over time. And you're going to be a company that ends up with a whole bunch of Bitcoin. So I'm of the belief that this is a long game. I don't think any company that was just trying to like get a short-term pump in their stock by doing this, they failed at it, and they were never in it for the right reasons. So I think the companies that stick around, also remember the Wall Street Journal literally wrote an article in 2022 declaring the death of Michael Saylor and his strategy. So like people need to remember how sentiment can shift. The one company that now everyone has accepted is a success, MicroStrategy. Mm-hmm. Even in 2022, people were like, they're dead. So I think everyone needs to zoom out on not just Bitcoin, but Bitcoin treasury companies. And just remember that this is a long game. It doesn't mean they're all going to be successful, but the companies that do this, if Bitcoin is the asset you and I think it is, and companies stick with this strategy for years on end, there's going to be a bunch that are successful, their stocks do well, and they end up with a whole bunch of Bitcoin.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. What do you think? So we talk about marketing and fear and greed and Bitcoin and the framing, and obviously this past year or so in the bull, you get a lot of you can live on a fraction of a Bitcoin, 0.1 Bitcoin. Was that all a lie, John? Was this all a lie that? And I talked to Jeff Walton. I'll preface a little bit with that. I talked to Jeff Walton like a month or two ago, and he was really on this kick of we need to reframe everything of just pricing your life in Bitcoin, because then it becomes very obvious as you can educate people on that your life is getting cheaper, right? It's the meme that we've all been passing around of the houses over the last couple cycles of just so is the 0.1 Bitcoin thing is great of a marketing thing as it is in to reframe someone's mind when they're coming into the space. It also is a double-edged sword. So I would love for you to unpack, is it true or is it a lie, or what's going on here?
I think you have to run the numbers to assess whether that is true. And when I say run the numbers, you have to say, okay, what would Bitcoin have to go up at per year? Literally put together a spreadsheet and say, what's it at now? And let me make assumptions for the next 25 years. And if Bitcoin goes up at 50% per year, where does that put it 20 years from now, 25, whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And then say, okay, if a Bitcoin is going to be worth, $10 million per Bitcoin, what is Bitcoin's total market cap? And that one's easy math. If Bitcoin is 10 million, that's 215 trillion, because you're 10 million times 21 million Bitcoin, right? So could Bitcoin be a $200 trillion total asset in roughly 20 years, let's just say?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's possible, but now you have to say, well, let's compare that to other assets. Gold is like a $30 trillion asset today. So could Bitcoin be like 15 times the size of gold? I mean, it could. I don't think that's crazy. Also, remember that what is the total size of all the monetary assets out there? We've all seen these charts before, and it's like a little under a quadrillion. It's like 900 something trillion is what the total pie is. So then you have to start to say, what is Bitcoin as a percentage of the total? And we've seen these, it's like, Bitcoin is less than 0.5% today. So then you have to start saying, if Bitcoin's going to be 10 million per coin, what is it going to be as a percentage of everything? If it gets up to 200 trillion, what is that? What is the total pie going to increase at per year? Is it going to, you have to make an assumption, 5%, 10%, 7%. I just say 7%. And then if my own numbers show that if Bitcoin hits 10 million per coin 20 years from now, and it's a $200 trillion asset, it's still less than 10% of global financial assets. So I think this is potentially grounded in reality. But then the next big thing you have to do is say, okay, everything you want to spend in your life is going to get more expensive, right? Homes are getting more expensive. Your kid's school is getting more expensive. Healthcare is getting more expensive. Taking your family on a vacation is getting more expensive, like on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
So then you have to say, okay, homes are going to increase by 5% per year. So the home that I want to buy today, that's $500,000. Well, that might be over $1 million, 20 years from now. So you have to actually put pen to paper on all this stuff. And I think final comment where this stuff gets tricky is some people say, oh, if you have this much Bitcoin, you're set for life. And I think that is a very that's too vague a way of talking about it, because one person's set for life is completely different than another. Does your set for life mean you want to have 7 kids and you want, your wife to stay home with them, and you want to take them all on a vacation every single year, and you want to have a lake house, and you want to everyone to have a car, that and you want to send them to private college for whatever reason? That's a totally, 0.1 Bitcoin's probably not going to get you that. If you want to have one kid and live a very frugal lifestyle, then, and that's your set for life, then, we're kind of answering 2 completely different questions is my point.
Yeah. And a lot of it goes back to financial literacy and just in general. And this goes back to a lot of our conversation today of just, you got to put in the work, the work has to be done regardless, upholding the network, et cetera, defining what you want in your life, the intentionality, the hard work, it's everything. It just always seems to come back to that. You kind of touched on it really, really quick there, just with like the 900 trillion. One of my last questions here was what's the end game for Bitcoin? Like 100 years from now, or it could be 1,000 years from now, or 50 years from now. I don't know when it is, but what do you think the end game is for Bitcoin? Like the final resting stop? Is it, as I know, Jeff Booth's always, it's got to account for every dollar. It's going to account for that 900 trillion to 1 quadrillion. It's got to account for all that. Jack Mallers is always, hey, it's 1/2 of every trade. So 450 trillion is its final resting spot. Like how do you see it truly at the end of the day? Like the final end game, the final resting spot for Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I view it as base money. So, for example, if you look at like all the dollars in the world, there's not 900 trillion base dollars like sitting in a bank account somewhere or sitting on the central bank, right? Like these things that are valued in the 900 trillion, like there's a home that is worth that amount.
Yep.
There's some guy who owns a deli in your town and the deli might be worth $1 million as a business. That doesn't mean $1 million exists somewhere. So it's like all the things that we own, like household net worth, basically across the whole world is like 900 trillion. So I don't know if Bitcoin captures that. I for this one, I like Saylor's thesis, which is like, look at all the assets that are performing a monetary store of value function, and then assume that Bitcoin over time can capture a healthy percentage of that. So homes are always going to be on that $900 trillion chart. There's always going to be people storing value in a home. It's just that the Bitcoiner thesis is saying, hey, this is overinflated right now. So let's take some monetary premium away from that. So I'm of the belief that Bitcoin will continue to grow as a share. Hard for me to put a number on it, like with a date. I would, when I've seen Saylor present this, I think he's accurate in saying, look at the monetary assets and Bitcoin, make your own assumption about what share of that Bitcoin is going to get over a 5, 10, 30-year period.
I know you got to run here. My last thought or question to you is, is there anything that is worrisome to you? Or, we've talked about, a fair amount of bullish things like that. Obviously there's the Nostr versus core. Bitcoin always has infighting going on. Is there anything that worries you, or, humans not caring about sound money, like whatever, like just across the spectrum inside of Bitcoin or that world that worries you or scares you?
I will give you my things that potentially concern me about Bitcoin. It would be, I do think, and I'm not trying to FUD here, but I do think we have to acknowledge that there's potentially some sort of quantum computing threat at some point in time. I think we have to be very humble about the fact that the number of humans on Earth who probably understand quantum computing and where it's headed and how it affects Bitcoin is not a big number. But I think it has to be on your list of potential concerns for Bitcoin on like a multi-decade time horizon, right? So that's on my list, but it's not something I'm losing sleep over.
Yeah.
What I think could potentially would be a problem is if those big custodians that are the institutional service providers for large holders, so it's Coinbase, it's BitGo, it's Anchorage, it's Fidelity, right? If there was a major custodian failure and an entity lost, tens of thousands of Bitcoin, billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, firstly, for starters, I would say you have to remember that doesn't affect, the Bitcoin that an individual has in his or her hardware wallet, right? Like he or she can still send that Bitcoin the same day as the institutional custodian loses Bitcoin. So it doesn't affect the network from like a functionality perspective. But from a narrative perspective, if there was a large institutional entity like an ETF or something where they just said, hey, we had our custodian had a failure and the Bitcoin is gone from this ETF, just for example, that would be a huge narrative problem for Bitcoin. I think it would kind of smack people in the face and be like, hey, are you sure you want, it would scare them into being like, hey, this is a bearer asset and you can just lose it. And don't you want the comfort of fiat, knowing that your fiat can't just disappear? And Bitcoin would have to deal with that type of a narrative. Again, I don't expect this to happen. I would put this at like a sub 2% chance of happening. But when I just try to brainstorm what would be something really bad to happen to Bitcoin from a narrative perspective, it would be like a true custodian failure where billions of dollars of Bitcoin is lost.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like everything to me comes down to these narratives. Again, we've talked about it a lot today as well, just the narratives coming from somewhere. I don't know where they're coming from, but there's always these narratives that seem to be well-funded. They seem to have a lot of coordination to them, whether it's the energy usage, it's, hey, we're putting spam on the blockchain, it's harmful to people, or it's the fact that it's even out there. I mean, just everything, or custodians going down, like the narrative, it's all narrative. Again, it's psychological at the end of the day. It's psychological. Money is psychological. So yeah. John, I thank you so much for joining today, man. This is it's been an incredible talk.
Always love talking to you, Brandon. And as usual, feels like we just scratched the surface.
Seriously.
But that was phenomenal.
It's so good. Where can people find you?
So yeah, you can see the logo over my the shoulder is the Swan logo. So I'm part of the team at Swan. You could find me John _@_Swan on Twitter. LinkedIn, Twitter DM, whatever. If you want to learn more about Swan, if you just want to ask a question, Twitter's probably the best place to find me.
If you like that episode, then you're going to love the playlist we put together for you with our most recent podcast with the top Bitcoiners, sound money, liberty advocates in the world. Go check those out here. We'll see you inside. You're going to love them.